Tonight, we sit down with author and blogger J.W Ocker to talk about the business of cursed objects, writing horror for a young audience, and Christmas theme parks? Deep beneath the stacks of the New York Public Library, it's Brian and Eric Don't Belong Here. Stay with us. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Brian and Eric Don't Belong Here, a weekly exploration of the strange, the paranormal, and the macabre. I'm one of your titular hosts, Brian, here as always with my hopefully not cursed colleague, Eric. Eric, what's going on, man?
Brian, I might be cursed.
Eric, no, I told you not to open that demonic book.
I can't not read the demon book. You know this about me.
Eric, we had a rule when we started this podcast that you absolutely would never open a flesh-bound book.
Yeah, but you gave it to me and told me I had to keep it.
I said hold it. I said hold it while I do the intro.
I've literally physically been holding this book for 3 months. I'm going to open. I'm going to see what's inside.
Eric, all of the text is written in blood.
Yeah, I know. And it's running.
Well, thankfully, Eric, we just had an interview with author J.W. Ocker. He wrote a book called Cursed Objects, among several other wonderful books, and he's going to walk us through curses and we'll talk to him offline of maybe how we can remove the, oh my God, you are entirely swirled by a green mist.
Yeah, that just happens. I can't even see out of it. I don't even know I can't even see it. This is really hard to drive now. Thank you. I don't know how I'm going to go to the store.
Oh man, okay. We'll just get right into it.
Perfect.
Hello, everybody. It's Brian and Eric. We are here with J.W. Ocker, a Lowell Thomas and Edgar winning author of self-described macabre travelogues, spooky kids books, and horror novels. We are so excited to have him and pick his brain a little bit. Jason, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
We believe me, we appreciate you.
It's so easy these days. Just reach out on Twitter, hit a button, suddenly you're talking to people. Thankfully that is the case. If it took more than that, we just wouldn't try.
We require as little friction as possible.
No, it's a good way to live life, honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
Jason, I found out about you because I found your book Cursed Objects, and that sent me down a rabbit hole of just like, oh, this is awesome. Enjoyed the hell out of that book, and then saw what you have coming up, which is also extremely down our alley. Would you mind describing your work and your primary interests?
Sure. So I started out as a nonfiction writer, and that's my primary voice. I visit weird stuff and then I write about it. That's pretty much sums it up. That can be anything from the macabre, whatever, tombs in Rome, to a weird natural wonder, to some historical oddity, anything that catches my interest from like the background static of life that I can fit into a camera. So it's very important that there's like a physical element to it, right? So if it's just folklore floating around, it's fine. But if there's like a folklore attached to this cabin or this rock, then I'm all about it. So I visit weird stuff. I write about it in travelogues, which usually means they're first person, which means I write about myself experiencing it. Usually more often than not. So like I always joke that the word "I" is the word that I use the most in any of my books. So basically, I take you with me on my trips. Is at the end of the day, and that can be living in Salem for a month. I can be looking for Poe artifacts. I could be looking for death sites in New England, or like you read, it could be looking for cursed objects.
Can we back? What are death sites in New England?
Actually, yes, that's a good question.
So I had to put a pin in that.
No, it's a good question. My very first book was called the New England Grimpendium, and I wanted a macabre book of sites that wasn't paranormal. Like there's a ton of paranormal haunted place books, and I didn't want to do a haunted place book, but I wanted it to be macabre, so it had to be death related. So that means the way I divided that up into 5 sections was sites connected to people who made their fame through the macabre, directors of horror movies who are buried in New England or who filmed at a certain place in New England, or writers that made their fame in New England. Then there was a section on tragedies and serial killers. So anything connected to serial killers and tragedies in New England, did that. There's a section on strange cemeteries, section on monsters, which is basically cryptids and aliens. And then one more, I can't remember the last one, but it was all stuff based on death. death was a big part of it. And there's a physical site. There's a gravestone, a place to go to. That's what I meant. That's what I meant by death sites. Because again, there's no real. It's not a real category. I kind of had to make it up so I can have like a book. But that's
well,
why I had
it
to
is
make up the
now.
title too.
Yeah.
What came first for you? The interest in travel or the interest in sort of the macabre and weird?
The macabre really was first. I mean, I've always kind of been into it. When I was a kid, though, I grew up like in a strict Christian home, so I wasn't allowed to watch horror movies or nothing. Wasn't doing spooky things at home. That didn't happen till later in life for me. But it did come first, and then travel just came about. I don't know. Travel was. It's not the typical travel. Like I always tell people when I tell them I'm a travel writer, it's not like I don't sample like lobster rolls in Maine cliff dwelling restaurants, and I don't go taste the latest cocktails on some island resort. That's not me. I go see a murder victim at a cemetery, or I go see a saint relic in some random church in Connecticut. So that's the kind of travel I do. And then it just kind of happened because I mean, one day I was just tired of like being inside of my apartment forever and ever and ever. And I just got out and drove 20 minutes away. I happened to live next door to, at the time in Maryland, to the town where the Blair Witch was filmed, the Burkittsville.
Oh, okay.
Literally the town over. There's a diner across my apartment that was in the movie. So I just like went there and then like, oh, that's there. What else is here? And so I started driving around the mid-Atlantic, Centralia, Pennsylvania, the alien Martian landing in New Jersey, just all these weird sites. And
sorry, there was an alien. There was a Martian landing in New Jersey.
Well, it's the I forgot his name, Orson Welles, when he did the War of the Worlds.
Oh, okay, got it.
So he randomly, when he was doing the radio cast, so obviously the book takes place in London, but when he was doing his radio cast, he picked a place randomly in New Jersey. Just kind of closed his eyes and picked a place called Grover's Mill, New Jersey. So that when people were listening to the broadcast, people in Grover's Mill, they were like, "Holy shit, they're here! They're landing here!"
Wow.
So what they've done is they've commemorated that with a big giant plaque, or actually it's like it almost looks like Han Solo and carbonite. That's the size, and the texture, and the look of it. And then on the surface is inscribed, instead of Harrison Ford's body, it's like pictures of the aliens, pictures of people listening to the radio, Orson Welles, and it's all right there. There's a mural at the local diner. It's
amazing!
Like, whole thing. Yeah, it's really cool thing. Really cool. Again, just sitting in a place in the middle of a park in New Jersey. You never know if you didn't just drive there to go see it.
That's crazy. I just want to back it up a second, because before you became like the goth Anthony Bourdain, did you have a different career? I feel like you're literally describing the dream job. All 10 of our listeners right now are falling out of their seats like, wait, how do I get paid to go investigate spooky stuff in my car?
That's funny. I haven't heard goth Anthony Bourdain, but the funny thing is every once in a while I get close to TV a little bit, to the TV world, and one of the shows that was pitched with me was called American Death Trip, and they definitely pitched it as Anthony Bourdain goes to spooky stuff.
Hell yeah.
Idea. That's funny.
Hell yeah.
I mean, get on board. That sounds great.
Were you always in this? Were you always in this world? Were you always kind of a writer, investigator, journalist, or did you have were you like an accountant and then you kind of had your light bulb moment?
No, so I grew up. I always had a propensity to writing. I read a lot. I read tons of books. That usually yields a little bit of writing ability, just naturally, just by osmosis.
Sure.
And I was decent at English. And then when I went to college, I didn't know what to do, so I just got an English major. Did a little bit more writing. I went to a college where mostly just graduated preachers and teachers. And I didn't want to do either one of those two things. So I tried to take writing into the corporate world, which worked out a little bit. I worked in magazines. I worked in corporate transcripts. I worked in copywriting. I did everything you can do in a corporate world, writing wise. So writing was always there for me. But I never thought of myself as a journalist. In fact, I was working at a magazine making fun of journalists one day. And my co-editor said, that's what we're doing, right? We're journalists. I just didn't realize it at all. That's how clueless I was. I said, we work for a magazine. It was like a ocean technology, like industry magazine too. So writing's always been my world. It's kind of how I define myself. The travel, I don't really define myself by travel. It's more like, that's how I make my life interesting. Like I'm not an interesting guy. Like if you like cracked open my chest, it'd just be boring. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I started going to weird stuff, because I was boring. So if I'm going to make myself interesting, I need to go get it externally.
I was gonna say a casual Google search disproves that immediately.
But again, all I had to do was like go to stuff. Like I get the most boring person in the world can go to cool stuff, and suddenly they have stories. They become cool just because they went to see a giant quarry painted with Technicolor skulls, you know, something that's
Hell
a
yeah.
story I get to tell every single dinner party. So, but again, it's not me. I didn't make I didn't make it. I just drove to it one day and wrote about it, took a picture.
Fair enough. I did like it. So I your blog, Odd Things I've Seen, is a fantastic collection of just weird stuff kind of around the any given area. And I like that it is a collection of, there is like spooky, macabre, goth Anthony Bourdain stuff, but you also like have a piece on just, there's a Clerks mural from the movie Clerks.
Yeah, in my town in Nashville. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically what I've definitely twisted the definition of oddity to anything I'm interested in. so I'll go see something if it's like some kind of touchstone of my childhood. I'll go see it, even though it's not really odd to anybody else. There's different veins, kind of how I describe of the different types of oddity. The macabre is the largest, the one that's the most interesting to me, but there are other veins of like interest that I fall under. For instance, holiday, Christmas, right? So I've been to the house where Jingle Bells was written or whatever, or no, Nightmare Before Christmas. No, Nightmare Before Christmas. Night Before Christmas was written. It's in Rhode Island. It's got a big Santa Claus plaque on it. You know, it's like all this stuff. So I like that kind of stuff too. I like anything Christmassy, I'll go see for sure. I was in Pennsylvania in November, and they actually have a statue. I can't remember the name of the town, but a statue of 4 Christmas carolers, bronze Christmas carolers. They look like classic Dickens Christmas carols with top hats and like those and walking sticks. And there's these 4 guys that just started caroling like 100 years ago in that town, and they carried it on every year since then. And they made a giant statue. So permanent Christmas Christmas memorials are interesting to me.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. Have you heard of the God, I forget where it is. It might be near New Hampshire. I believe there is a low quality amusement park, a lower tier amusement park that is entirely Christmas themed year round.
That's in New Hampshire, Santa's Village. And I will tell you, it is higher quality than I thought when I went to it. So I've been to it 2 or 3 times. I went to it like sometimes I kick off the Halloween season by going to it for no reason. So I get to wear like a jack-o'-lantern on my shirt and go hang out with, like, they have live reindeer there, just in this like place. No, it's really cool. Like and you can ride in the sleigh, and there's like a bunch of people that look like Santa Claus, and it's actually it's privately run by a family, so it's a lot more like care than your average like roadside attraction. But I would tell people to go there in a second. There are definitely some other Santa's like theme parks across the country that are broken down, shadows of themselves from the 1950s. But the one in New Hampshire is legit. I would take anybody there, and I guarantee you have a good time. Yeah.
It's my wife and I have a fascination with like, for lack of a better word, lower tier amusement parks, and that's been on our list. I'm almost disappointed to hear it's pretty good.
It is pretty good. They theme it very well. There's like music playing. It's like they play out. They have this one ride where it's a dark ride. So you go in there in this little carriage, and then like you get guns, and you're supposed to shoot humbugs. So it's like Scrooge themed. So you're shooting these like little bugs that are called humbugs. And they completely, obviously they took that ride from somewhere else and repurposed it into a Christmas ride. But again, the best part about it 100% is the reindeer barn. They're giant horns. They all have their names, Prancer and Cupid, above them, and you can go feed them. And like, it's like, that's my favorite part of the whole park.
Amazing.
We also have a thing called, not to get all Christmassy on you when you want to talk spooky
stuff. No, hell yeah, let's do it.
Place called the Christmas Loft. There's one in New Hampshire and one in Vermont, and they're both like little miniature villages. So you can walk into middle of summer, you can walk into the Christmas Loft. It's dark. It looks like you're outside in the sky. There's Santa on a reindeer and all these houses inside this warehouse. And they're all little shops with Christmas memorabilia, ornaments and books and whatever sets. And you just feel like you're inside a little Christmas New England village just for that hour you're there. It's really cool. I always try to go there as well.
That sounds incredible. Do you think there's any, this is just me riffing off the top of my head, do you think there's any connection between an interest in the macabre, the spooky, and Christmas? Because like, I think I also have a similar like kind of Venn diagram of interest, and I wonder if there is a connection there that I've never threaded the needle on.
I mean, the Brits, Christmas is a spooky holiday, and they tell ghost stories on Christmas. The BBC makes Christmas or whatever horror story productions every year to play at Christmas. So they definitely have it down there. But there is something about Christmas that, and we see it these days, where we're really kind of over rotating on the spooky, where we have Krampus everywhere and we have Tim Burton everywhere, So there's something fundamentally odd about this guy, right? This slovenly guy just squeezing himself down your chimney every to give your kids
get out of my house.
I know it's a very disturbing idea.
Can I opt out?
I think you can. You have to convert though, I think, to something else. But yeah, it's definitely something in there that's like just it appeals to the fantasy, right? That's what I guess that's what it is at the end of the day, is the fantasy, and the macabre is mostly fantasy as well. So there's that connection.
That's a great point.
We did an episode back in our archived shows on Christmas. Or did we do it this? I don't remember when we did it, but we did at least one kind of deep dive into the folklore around Christmas. And I feel like any of those old holidays are pretty rich reservoirs of like old folk and cultural beliefs, which always have an element, no matter what they're celebrating, that is like a little otherworldly to a degree, I think.
Last year, somebody gave me a horror advent calendar, and all it was is every door opened up to some kind of monster Christmas myth from across the world. And there was like all kinds of monsters. Like I think we're the only culture without a monster in our Christmas, honestly.
Man, we need one. We
do need one. I mean, we've been stealing
so you
Krampus
need to come
like
up
crazy,
with one.
Yeah, for sure. No, we definitely need one. I mean, it just for some reason, like you said, it begs for it for some reason.
Jason, I'm throwing out there. I want to talk a little later about your books for younger audiences. You start young, you spook them young.
Yeah,
keep them talking about it.
The Christmas creep, and then go with that.
There you go.
It's actually what they call me. That's my
Christmas creep.
I haven't been invited to a work holiday party in a decade. I actually, Jade, you said a phrase earlier which kind of struck me, which is you said we're over rotated on the spooky, which I think is true. Like you see it seeping into every facet of pop culture and stuff like Stranger Things to everything.
Yeah.
Why do you're kind of, I feel like you're an interesting sort of cultural anthropological explorer in a way. Why do you think that is?
It's very interesting. I think part of it, is this whole geeks rule the world thing right now, right? Where like we got comic book stuff everywhere. Everybody knows the most minor Marvel characters. When back in the day, nobody knew who they were. Now they have entire shows about themselves,
Yeah.
And I think part of that Venn diagram of geekdom, fandom, whatever you want to call it. And I don't use those words disparagingly. I just mean like the center, the people that really dedicate themselves to like properties. I use that disparagingly, I guess. But
no, we're on the same page.
Horror is definitely part of that pie slice. So now everybody that grew up loving horror that can make movies and books, it's getting into culture, and of course, horror is becoming, because of the internet, horror is becoming more and more of a lifestyle. From the decor to the collections to making everything. Celebrating Friday, we celebrate Friday the 13th these days. This wasn't something that happened back when I was younger. Like nowadays, though, you celebrate Friday the 13th. You put stuff on the socials. You watch a horror movie that night specifically. We just are doing halfway to Halloween is a thing now, right? That was never a thing back in the day. Now suddenly we're just like, any chance to get spooky, we're gonna do it. So I think it's just an overflow of geek culture right now. But we'll see. I mean, I'm always two different minds. I love the spooky. I love having more around me. But if it's too mainstream, I get a little bit bored with it. Honestly, it becomes like not because it's like not cool anymore, but usually when things go mainstream, they get a lot smoother. Like the rough edges come off and they become a lot more shinier. Yeah. And really, with horror and the macabre, you don't want that to happen. You want
that's a fantastic way to articulate it.
Yeah, you don't want Texas Chainsaw Massacre on a 4K Blu-ray, right? You want it on a grainy old TV set in your kitchen, right? That's kind of what you want. So. It's got upsides and downsides. The upsides is that every Target aisle is packed with cool stuff every year. The downside is, it's whatever. Everybody has the same stuff, buys the same stuff to decorate their house with.
Hell yeah. I do have a question, kind of circling back a little bit. You talked about growing up, you were not a spooky child. Do you have a moment that you remember that kind of captured your interest or imagination?
Yeah, a few. Like, and you can almost see like the sieve in my brain kind of grabbing them when I had them. So for instance, we grew up, now I wasn't a spooky child, but when you're a religious person, you believe in demons and witches and angels. You like believe in way more stuff than other people do, more than paranormal people do. But there's a few moments. One was, so we also didn't have cable for a lot of my growing up. So anytime I saw a horror movie, it was like snatches on a hotel TV when we're on vacation or at a friend's house. But one was Dr. Phibes' Rise Again. The Vincent Price movie. I remember watching this. We were as Saturday afternoon matinee, Monster Theater, whatever. My dad was there. Two of my brothers were there, and it was like normally they'd be watching sports or something like that. But for some reason, they let me watch Fives, the Five sequel. And it was the version where at the very end when he's like rowing his wife's corpse down the river, he's actually singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, which these days you can't get that version as much, but like because of rights. But like the version showed then was that. And I remember like nobody else liking this except for me. Like I could just tell the tone in the room was like, why the heck are we watching this scarred old dude wander around Egypt or whatever he was doing? And I was the only one like just fascinated by it. And that stuck in my head. And I remember another time, Halloween, it was a Tuesday night. And the way I celebrated Halloween as a kid. So when I grew up, we trick-or-treated for the first 4 or 5 years of my life. Then we got religious, stopped trick-or-treating, started having harvest parties at church, that kind of thing. So for Halloween night, we didn't celebrate, but what we did was we turned on all the lights so the trick-or-treaters wouldn't bother us. We'd go down to the TV in the basement and we watched like Garfield special and Charlie Brown special while eating Halloween candies, kind of how we did it. And I remember doing that one night and going outside and the night just felt different. This was Maryland. This wasn't even New England. And it just felt different. Like that spooky quality. Like the way I try to explain it to people is there's something about this, like this shape of a skull, human skull, that is very appealing to me. I just love it. I love that visual, that shape for some reason, or the feel of an old New England cemetery, that crumbly atmosphere of centuries old. That just appeals to me as an aesthetic. Even though, you know, whatever you see me, I'm just in a blue t-shirt right now. I'm not like goth, but that stuff like really is, I don't know, it just makes me happy. So so I have a lot of those moments growing up where I'm just like, oh, that's cool. But I didn't know what it was. It wasn't really opened up to me until probably college that I was like, oh, this is what I like and why I like it. And it just happens to be spooky.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, that's, if anything, that's what college is for.
Yeah, to find out how spooky you are.
Right. Find out how spooky you are specifically.
I'm into spooky stuff. That's the Thanksgiving home.
Yeah. You come home dressed like Ozzy Osbourne and stuff. Like,
yeah. All right.
I thought we sent you to a Christian college. What's going
on? So Jason, your 2020 book, Cursed Objects, it's an absolute delight of a book. Could you talk about what attracted you to like cursed objects as a subject and like what inspired doing a book about it?
Honestly, I never thought about it. And then at the time we were shopping around my first adult horror novel, 12 Nights at Rotter House. We were shopping at this publishing house called Quirk in Philadelphia.
They're great.
Really well known. Yeah. For making high quality books. They're a great house. And for some reason they didn't take 12 Nights. Another publisher ended up taking that. But in researching me for 12 Nights, I realized my past, right? Like you said, I'm all over the internet with standing beside spooky stuff. Yeah. So they had this idea sitting on a shelf for one of the editors at Forever. She just wanted to do a book about cursed objects, but had no idea who would write it, how they would do it. So like, hey, this is a perfect book for you. And at first I was like, no, I don't do assignments. It's got to be for my own passion, or I'm not into it. She said, well, think about it. Find an angle on it. Find something you like about it. And then we'll give it to you. So like a lot of times when there's like books assigned, you don't get royalties, you don't get ownership of the copyright. They just give you a flat fee and you write their book for them. In this case, they were so nice to me that they gave me the copyright, gave me a royalty structure. So it's basically like I pitched the book to them almost. And I really did. I went away and came up with like a 10-page pitch. And what I realized was, looking around, is that this didn't exist. There was no like compendium of cursed objects. It was like listicles online of 10 objects and like whatever, and YouTube videos of top 10 cursed objects. They're all the same cursed objects, and half of them weren't cursed, they were haunted or something like that. So I
want to talk about that in a second.
Yeah. So it hit me. So first thing that hit me was, oh, this book fills a unique niche, which is what I want to do. I want to fill unique niches. So it fills a unique niche. And then I found a way to just exist in, because they're cursed objects. They actually were right down my alleyway. They're physical things you can go see. So then that's how I also made it mine. I went to go see cursed objects. I went and bought a cursed object. And so I do appear in the book, even though it's, a little bit more of an encyclopedia of cursed objects. So I was able to make it mine voice wise and find a passion for it. And now I love cursed objects. I can't believe I had such a blind spot to them for so many years, honestly.
Did buying your own cursed object give you pause? What was it?
Okay. So real fast, I want to give a little context here. So in the book, you talk about you in a section about eBay cursed objects.
Yeah, the business.
I don't want to give too much away from the book. People should buy it for themselves. But you purchased a cursed object for yourself. Mm-hmm. Could you talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, totally. I'll show it to you. So here it is. It's this
There it is.
brass bulldog.
Whoa.
So again, in order for me to like a topic, I have to be involved in the topic. If the book is just an encyclopedia of stuff, I'm not interested. Like the way I explain my nonfiction projects is if I never get a book out of it, it's still worthwhile for me to do because I have new experiences. I make friends. Every single nonfiction book I've ever written, I've made friends
Totally.
that I get to interview and meet, and we hang out and keep in touch and stuff. So the book itself is just a cherry on top of the experience. So cursed objects had to be an experience for me, and part of that experience was I had to buy a cursed object. Now, I don't believe in cursed objects. I don't believe they have a power. I believe you can let them have a power over you for sure, psychologically, but I don't believe they intrinsically have a power over you. But the thing about buying a cursed object and bringing it into your home where, you have a family and stuff is kind of doesn't matter what you believe. You could just be wrong, Like, and if I'm wrong about this, I'm taking a giant risk. And the thing about cursed objects is it doesn't just hurt the people who own the item. Sometimes it's just people who come in contact with the item. Journalists who write about the item, they're in a body count. If they just like gotten so interested in an object that they wrote an article about it for a major newspaper and then die of a blood disease 6 months later, they're in the body count for that cursed object. So I was a little terrified of that. I was terrified really of dying accidentally while writing the cursed objects book because it's going to be in the obituary, right? Like Jason died, however I died, getting my hand stuck in Pringle cans. He was writing a book about cursed objects, right? So it'd just be there. I would become another body in the count, no matter how I died. It just, whatever. It'd be a lesson learned.
You express in the book specifically not wanting that, which is where our interests diverge. Of like, no, put me in a body count of a cursed object. Give it to me. That's what I want.
It's so fun. On this show, Brian and I are in a constant tension where I am fascinated by the occult and kind of have like a reverse Pascal's wager thing similar to yours, which is like, it doesn't matter what I believe. There's so many warnings around so much of this stuff that if it is true, you can get really fucked up.
Yes,
and a lot of people are like, don't do it, man.
Yeah.
Whereas Brian doesn't believe as much in it. And just for I don't know, Brian, what's your motivation? Like just
Eric,
the jackass? Like
Eric will finally go viral.
yeah, that's the one. That's the one. We've
Eric, it's been years, bud.
We've been toiling in the salt mines for a long time, and frankly, we're just covered in salt. But we've done. I have a personal fascination with like the kind of Western occult tradition and grimoires and stuff like that, and we talk a lot about like, should we try to actually summon a demon? And I'm so scared to mess with that. And Brian is super game.
So I've done it all. So like one Halloween, I do like a daily blog for Halloween's, like for 2 months. I celebrated for 2 months. One year my previous house, we had a dirt basement, old 1890 house in New Hampshire, man. Dirt basement, giant blocks of granite the size of like coffins in the wall. So we went down there in this dirt floor basement, drew a pentagram in the dirt, and did a Ouija board, like right there in the basement. I definitely a little bit of an edgelord when it comes to the occult, because again, fundamentally, I don't believe in it. But still, again, it doesn't matter if you don't believe in it. Again, bringing a cursed object into my house just seems irresponsible if it's true about cursed objects. But even if it's not true, it seems irresponsible. So I brought it in. I wrote about it. I took it to vacation with us. I think we flew to St. Augustine, Florida that year.
Oh, you brought it on a plane?
I brought it on a plane. I didn't tell my kid. I didn't tell my family about it until like halfway through. And they're like, and my wife was like, what was she said, I could have gone the whole trip without knowing that, is what she told me. So yeah, and honestly, it was a good year. It wasn't a bad year. I definitely have had shitty stuff happen since then, but like that year was like fine.
Yeah, so the year the book came out was arguably a pretty cursed object, maybe in of itself.
Oh,
yeah. It's a good point. I forgot about that.
One thing I think is interesting. I sorry, we're just spoiling that whole chapter of the book.
Go for
it. But one thing I think is interesting is you remark on when you purchased the bulldog that you showed us. It's almost like you were buying an experience.
Yes, that's exactly.
And I think that's a big part of the macabre paranormal thing.
That's really
is like
interesting.
That's people talk about like the Warrens being kind of hucksters and cheats, and it was like and granted, I'm sure someone online can correct me on this, but in a large amount of cases, I feel like they're not selling anything people don't want to buy,
Yes. Yeah. No, there's a market for it for sure. I mean, it's very, I don't know. It's just very weird to me. Like basically when you think of buying a cursed object, right? You think of whatever, the beginning of Gremlins is what you think of, right? The old stuff to the rafters, shop in Chinatown, and the guy who runs the shop who won't sell you anything even though it's a shop. He's like, no, you can't have that. That's cursed. That's bad for you. And then nothing. It's all on sale, but none of it is for sale. And of course that's a thing of the past now. I mean, it's still around, but most people buy online, right? Amazon one click or whatever. And so what I thought was the experience was, so the person I bought it from, they sent me a big long email about it, like how their father got it, a very vague email, but still an email how their father got it and all the misfortune they'd had since then. And then when I won, they sent it to me in a box, and the box had like warnings scrawled all over it saying, be careful what you wish for, whatever, be careful what you're doing. So it was an experience. So all those moments of pause you mentioned earlier, I mean, that's what was happening. But it was so much better than her just shipping me a box with a bulldog wrapped in whatever bubble wrap, boring as that is, So those warnings helped out 1,000%. And that's when I realized, oh, these warnings are really what it's about, is like this like kind of like fear of bringing something forbidden into my house. So yeah, it was fun. I loved it. My favorite thing though is I can't remember if this made it in the book or not, but when I was looking for them on eBay, I had very specific criteria for what I wanted to buy off eBay for a cursed object. And it took me a while to find it. So when I would leave eBay, I would get targeted ads, digital ads from eBay all over my digital experience. And it would say, cursed objects. We have cursed objects for sale. eBay, come back to us. So obviously the algorithm was a form ad that they just put words in whatever you shopped for, whatever your search terms were. They just, if it was lamps, like we have lamps at eBay. Yeah. But in this case, because I searched cursed objects, they were like advertising eBay was advertising cursed objects to me all across my digital experience. It was pretty wild. I took a screenshot and I have it in my like files because it just was like such a weird, bizarre situation. But also interesting too, because there's a whole section on digital cursed objects that can be digital or mechanical. So, it's kind of valid as well. Like if it's an object, even a digital object, it can be cursed.
Yeah, are there like cursed files and stuff? And
cursed pop-up windows and cursed video games and a computer virus is a curse, right? It can just shut down everything. So it's again, I can buy digital items right now for my kids. If they're in a video game, they want me to buy clothes. Like I got a packet of pixels and bits, I guess, but it's an object that I paid money for. So that shows it can be if it's an object, it can be cursed.
Yeah. So also, and we said we would touch on this. The book has a very specific definition of what makes something cursed versus haunted. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So a lot of these listicles, they'll list like haunted objects. So haunted objects, in general, the way I defined it as a cursed object has to bring harm to you. If it could be economic harm, it could be bodily harm, it could be any kind of harm, but it has to bring harm to you. And a lot of the haunted objects, like the haunted wedding dress in Altoona or whatever, they don't bring harm to anybody. They're just creepy. They're like figures appear and little children, whatever, that Myrtle Beach plantation mirror. There's like fingerprints on the mirror. Damn spooky for sure, but no harm, no body count, right? So it needs to have a body count behind it. But also, not only does it need to cast harm, it needs to cast harm in supernatural ways. Like technically a gun is a cursed object, right? It's an object that can hurt people, right? So it has to be able to do it through supernatural ways you can't explain. So that was my definition of a cursed object. Brings harm unintelligently. It's not possessed or anything in a way that's unexplainable. Now, that said, a haunted object can act like a cursed object, right? So the Annabelle doll from the Warrens that you brought up, that's a doll that's possessed by a spirit. Technically, that's how the story goes, at least. But it acts like a cursed object because it's supposed to bring harm to anybody that interacts with the doll. So that's a haunted object acting like a cursed object. But again, if it's just spooky and things appear around it, it's not cursed. It's just spooky. So yeah, harm is a big important part of a cursed object.
It can't just be all bark, no bite. It's got to bite somebody.
It's got to bite somebody, really, and ideally more than one person for it to be a legit cursed object.
What is the body count on the bulldog? Do you know offhand?
No. So what she listed was financial ruin. Her family was financially ruined. Sicknesses in her family. So she didn't say anybody died. So this body count isn't a literal body count, but there was misfortune enough to her family that she thought. Whatever, she held on to it for decades for some reason, but eventually got rid of it. So the one thing I wasn't able to parse, and I looking back on it, I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd have contacted her and interviewed her and say, peel back behind the scenes and get her motivation. Do you actually believe this is cursed? Are you just trying to make a buck? I mean, it was only a
Yeah,
$10 thing. I bought it for $10, so she's not making like some of those haunted objects, cursed objects on eBay are like hundreds of bucks.
Yeah,
This one
yeah.
was like $11 plus shipping and handling. So it was like she's not making money off this bulldog. She could have made that just putting it in a yard sale, you know? So I want
Yeah,
to know like
huh.
what her is is she interested in the experience as well, giving that experience? Like that's some of the unanswered questions I really should have dug deeper into. I
Oh
think.
no, my head just went into a spiral. And granted, you have your own wonderful odd things I've seen podcast. So feel free to steal this. But however, if you would like to collaborate, boy, I'd love to get you guys on a call together.
Yeah, I should do that. I should look into that. That's for sure. I have her email address, so I should definitely do that.
Is there a protocol for getting rid of a cursed object? Like if I have a cursed object and I want to get rid of it, can I just like, because in the movies, obviously it's like you get the Annabelle doll and you leave it outside and then you wake up and it's like staring you in the face in the morning.
I
Like,
will
how
tell
do
you,
you, how do yeah.
the best way to do it is to give it to somebody else. That's
That's the thing, right?
Yeah, like the Ringu tape or whatever, right? That's the best way to get rid of it. If you talk to like the people that like make living, like the paranormal people that make livings off cursed objects, right? The Newkirks and the Zaphuses and stuff. They have definite protocols they use, which involves like sunlight and salt and prayer and a bunch of kind of a mishmash of like white magic, I guess I would call it. But really, you know, like it's a little bit of hocus pocus, but really, if you look into like the definition of cursed object, just give it to somebody. That's always the way. That's always the way to like get rid of your own curse. You know, you gotta be okay with that. You gotta be okay with like collateral damage there, but that's how you do it. That's how you survive.
I feel like Brian and I are destined to come into possession of a cursed bean that we just pass back and forth for decades.
I need this to be your problem for a couple of weeks, bud.
Yeah. Can you take the bean? We had the meeting about the bean. If you
Telling you, go to eBay right now. You'll find yourself
find
a
a
whole
cursed bean.
Yeah.
Brian, I'm going to buy you a cursed bean for your next birthday.
Eric, don't buy me a cursed bean, but also do it. So, Jason, kind of the intersection between the cursed objects and your traveling. How many of the cursed objects in the book did you get to travel to and like see or interact with in person?
I would say at least 50%. Now, there's a large percentage of, not large, there's a percentage of the objects there that are lost to history, so impossible to see. Some of them are pure digital, like, so there's no going to see them, but I probably saw about 50% in person.
Wow. Were any?
So I should be the most cursed person on the planet for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, you are on the show, so this could be the beginning of the end.
Right.
On that note, are there any you would suggest, like especially worth the trip for two hypothetical idiot podcast buddies who might be worth the trip?
So here's the interesting thing about cursed objects. Another reason how I chose the 50 or so that made in the book. It was hard, first off, because there's not that many famous cursed objects. There's tons of cursed object stories, but not famous cursed objects with lineages and actual histories in addition to paranormal histories. But the ones that are out there are almost to the T, they're in museums, like big museums. Yeah. So one of the slides I do when I do a talk about cursed objects is I take the 12 most famous cursed gemstones and I show you where to get them. They're all in major public museums, except for like, I think the Black Opal is in a private collection, but like the rest of them are just out there. Hope Diamond's the best one that's in Smithsonian for free. You can go in there for free. The Museum of Natural History in New York has, it slips my mind, but it has, I think, 1 or 2 cursed gemstones in its collection that are out and on display. London Museum has one. And there's like, again, the Black Orlov, there's like 12 different very famous cursed gems. You just have to go see them in museums. British Museum is the best museum for cursed objects, though. They have a couple cursed stones. They have the mummy board, which is the first ever cursed mummy piece, way before King Tut. It's supposed to have sunk the Titanic, caused World War II, which is it's just the top of a coffin that's shaped like a person, just in their Egyptian wing. They have a crystal skull on display there. A couple other cursed objects, but British Museum, I mean, obviously they ransack the world, so they have a lot of stuff. Right. But yeah, that's probably has the most cursed objects in it is the British Museum.
Have you in your travels and explorations and kind of poking around into this stuff, have you encountered anything that's giving you, I know you said you don't really believe in any of this, like believe, but have you seen or encountered anything that sort of made you question your own world belief or that you couldn't really explain?
You know, not even, I haven't even experienced something that I could exaggerate into a good story. And it's really depressing for me. Like, so, and when I say it to people, I try to context it by saying, and I'm the type of guy who spends the night in abandoned prisons and walked abandoned asylums and goes to cemeteries at midnight. So I've been all the places that ghosts are supposed to roam, and I still don't have a story that I can just even like use hyperbole to make it an interesting story. But that said, I definitely freak myself out for sure. That's like almost disconnected from the belief. Like I always say to people, where I freak myself out isn't when I'm on assignment. I put assignment in quotes because nobody ever assigns me these things. I just go do them. When I'm in a cemetery at midnight, I want something creepy to happen, even a little twig snap, something that I could turn into a story. So I'm looking for it. I'm hoping for it. Where I don't want it to happen is when I'm at my house. Like if my family's away for a week, I leave all the lights on. I hear voices in the fan. I get terrified of windows. If it's wintertime and there's a blanket of snow around, I'm terrified I'll see footprints in the snow. And I'll just freak myself out just by her being alone. And you expect a ghost to come out of like, again, a haunted prison. You don't expect it to come out of your refrigerator, right? So that's where like it'll really get you. So yeah, I don't have a single interesting spooky. I have a couple of stories that started out spooky and then had the most mundane answers, and they just feel silly by the time I get to the end of them. But nothing good. But here's the thing, though. What I always tell, I do talks with ghost hunter groups all the time, and I tell them, I'm not trying to disprove ghosts either. Like I wish, like if tomorrow I had a great experience, I'm one experience away from being a believer. So whatever. If that happens tomorrow, great. I'm pissed that took this long, but like. It finally happened to me. Casper came by or whatever. But what I tell them is, I have everything in common with you. I love old stories. I love local history. I love spooky buildings. I love ghost stories as an aesthetic. The only thing we don't have in common is capturing evidence of ghosts. So I'll go on a ghost hunt anytime anybody wants, just because it's such a fun activity. But I don't believe that like you're capturing voices on cassette recorders or you're like or whatever EMF detectors are detecting anything spectral. But like I said, one experience away. I just need like Marley to come one Christmas to my face, and then I can be like, yes, I finally believe, and like I'll change my life.
It's man, I like what you mentioned of like, give me something that I can give me a twig snap that I can turn into a story. And I might cut this out because it might bust us a little bit, but like we use a ghost box kind of frequently on this show. And part of it is and for anybody unfamiliar, it's a staticky radio like scanner that, it moves through radio signals fast and like gives you snippets of a word. And part of it is just give me something for podcasting that we can make a story out of. Give me something we can lean into. Because like, don't get me wrong, Eric and I can sit there with a Ouija board and just be like, well, nothing's happening.
Stop moving.
Give me a good coincidence that we can make a story out of.
That's all you need. In fact, so in line with that, so my 12 Nights at Rotter House that I referenced already, but it's about a writer who stays. He's supposed to stay 13 nights in a haunted house. That was originally my original idea for that was a nonfiction book. I wanted to go spend 13 nights and 2 weeks in a haunted house. I had to pick out the Gardner House in Massachusetts. I knew exactly where I wanted to go. But then I realized that's going to be a damn boring book. It's going to be me wandering halls, like jumping at shadows and nothing happening for 12 nights or 13 nights, 14 nights, whatever it ended up being in real life. So I just had to fictionalize the story. So that stuff happened.
I get it. Yeah, man. Where's the story going to come from? It's so on that note, and all in the Cursed Objects, the book has a I don't want to say tongue in cheek. I would say campfire story tone of like here are the stories attached to these. So that said, with all this talk around the belief of the paranormal, the stuff that it's a lot of stories, it's a lot of folklore. Are there any that would give you trepidation to fuck with?
That's a really good question. It's got to be. It has to be a human body part, right? That's kind of like Otzi the Iceman or whatever. That feels like actual desecration is happening that you're around, or a mummy. King Tut is fine too. For an example, you're actually desecrating a body, so it feels like a little more is at stake than like a gemstone that's like sitting in a glass case at a museum.
Sure, I can't get over. Now, do I, gun to my head, do I think the Annabelle doll is anything? No, of course not. Tony Spera the Warrens' son-in-law, current kind of in charge of that whole domain, treats it with a wrestler level kayfabe. And I'm a little like, well, what if?
Yeah, the thing about dolls is there's a reason why dolls are spooky. It's just there's something again uncanny about them. So even the Annabelle doll, which is a Raggedy Ann doll, right? And not the movie doll that's actually scary looking, but like it's a Raggedy Ann doll. Like I had one of those when I was a kid or whatever. Like thread hair and stuff and freckles. It's still human shaped, and there's something unsettling about a small human shape that's like has eyes, right? The eyes.
Well, because it could move around.
A
little gem is just going to maybe roll towards you, but a doll can do all sorts of stuff.
It has legs, has arms, so if they start acting like legs and arms, it's not a giant jump of imagination at all. Although that said, I will say, when it comes to Annabelle, I've always wanted to like borrow it and sleep with it for a night, like put it in my bed, like a teddy bear. You know, I've always wanted to do that gimmick, but they would never let me do that.
Okay, so all right, some synchronicity happening here. We desperately for years since Eric and I started doing this show at College Humor together. And we have desperately since then have been trying to get Tony Sparrow on this show. Obviously, if that ever happens, we're going to put in word and we're going to try to get that to happen.
Yeah, that'd be a great article. And then now that he's running that show, I assume that show is going to go a little bit more big time. It's not going to be stuck in a house in the Warrens, right? Connecticut or whatever. It's going to be out on tour and stuff.
I think it's actually going to be at Paracon, Brian.
Uh-oh. Dude, what if we pulled off an Ocean's 11 style heist?
We heist the doll. It's the Hangover, but with the animal.
Yeah, swap it out for another Raggedy Ann. You got it.
There you go.
That's right.
There you go. We'd get busted immediately.
Yeah, for sure.
It's we are not George Clooney, unfortunately.
But I think the penalty for that is very light. Stealing a doll is very light.
Yeah. It's just the shame of having gotten caught stealing a doll. You boys just hand this over.
My desire to get Tony Sparrow on this show is very real, and I'm hoping he never listens to this episode.
That's so funny because like part of the oddities I visit are like abandoned places, and I do a little bit of trespassing back in my youthful days. But these days I've stopped because the thing I'm scared the most is not getting busted or whatever. It's a security guard or a cop calling me sir, sir,
yes,
you're trespassing in this abandoned building. Like, I just feel like a totally as opposed to kid. What are you kids doing in here? Like that's fine. Yeah, but like, sir, you need to get out of here, sir.
In one of our earlier episodes where we were experimenting with the ghost box, Brian and I were in Brooklyn going to like a haunted corner, and we had the ghost box out like in front of us, and we had to pass a group of grown firemen. Just like watch. I was like, I don't know, man. We're
our nightmare is to ever have to tell to an authority figure, it's for our podcast.
Yes.
It's for our ghost podcast.
Yes. You think at this point in culture where everybody's doing like some kind of content creation, we get used to it, but I can't even like. No, I mean, I'm scared.
You at least have a book. That's like a real thing.
I guess, but still, I have to stand out in front of a house that's a serial killer house and take a picture of. I'm like, I feel so vulnerable, and if somebody asks, I'm always like faking the picture. I'm always like pretending I'm taking a picture that way and selfieing myself in front of a serial killer house or whatever. It's embarrassing. I don't have that like brazenness that a lot of like content creators do, where they can just like talk to the camera and walk around a crowded street. Like, I can't do that. I'm like so surreptitious. I don't know. Like I'll hide the camera to take pictures of it before I'll do anything else. So I don't know. Some people just like they're just more comfortable with themselves than I am. Put it that way.
I don't get it. So moving away from cursed objects a little bit, you have a new book coming out in September about cryptids.
Oh yeah, this is a good one. I had so much fun with this one. It's called United States of Cryptids. It's kind of the same concept as cursed object, except there's 75 cryptids in this book. Is it 100 cryptids? I can't remember. 75. I think 75 cryptids in the book. All U.S. based, and at least one for each state. Some states have 4 or 5. Some states only have 1. And the idea is, besides telling a monster story for each state or multiple monster stories for each state, I really focused on the places that celebrated their monster. So again, I need something physical to excite me. So if you put a statue of Bigfoot downtown, I'm coming. If you throw a festival for Mothman every year, I'm coming. If you have a plaque memorializing an alien abduction, I'm coming. So that's kind of... So it's a celebration of cryptids and the towns that celebrate them. So that's the unique angle, I think, that hasn't been done before. There's tons of cryptid encyclopedias for sure. But in this case, you know, we went out and like saw all these places across the country that were like dedicated to cryptids. You know, and there was a ton. It's like a thing. It's like a thing now. Like almost every town has a festival. So I did that. It's illustrated. It's like I don't know. I love monsters. Monsters are my favorite thing. So doing this book and traveling to these cryptid towns was just so much fun. And there's popular ones in there. There's obscure ones in there. Like, I don't even know how mainstream the word cryptid is. I feel like every time I use it, I get like mixed reactions. I thought it was a pretty common term. But that's how like down the weird I've been for too long.
Sure.
Cursed objects people get in a second, but cryptids are like, what is that, like a currency? Is that Bitcoin?
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah. Is that a Dogecoin? Is that
exactly. Yeah. Now it's a giant hairy monster usually.
Yeah.
I think where cursed objects captured my imagination. So I think you tackle what Eric and I aim for, or at least have begun aiming for, is like as we've kept doing this, you know, we're kind of learning like us back and forth week to week of like, is this real? Probably not. But the culture around these things are extremely interesting. What do you think is the kind of unstoppable fascination with cryptids?
Yeah. Well, one of the things for me is whether you believe in Bigfoot or the lizard man or whatever, something happened. So unlike cursed objects, most of my research for cryptids was old newspapers, newspapers.com and old newspapers, because these things were like written about in real time almost back then. You know, every day there was a new article about the hunt for the hodag or whatever. So, you know, I was just reading these newspaper accounts. So even if you don't believe that what they saw was a wolf woman, something happened to get this town all kind of fired up, right? There were hunters and there were jokes and there were like, they capitalized on it with like recipes at the local restaurants and stuff. So this was a real event that happened, regardless of whether you believe in cryptids or not. But I think that what fascinates people about cryptids in general, the people that are fascinated by cryptids, is it's actually a good element of humanity. I think it's just wonder. I think they are desperate they're terrified that we have explored the world too much, that there's nothing new to learn, there's nothing new to find, there's no surprises from Mother Nature for us. So what cryptid hunters really want is to be surprised. They want these things to exist just so they can, not so they can be like, look, we're right, or just because it's nature surprising us again. And that kind of wonder is kind of beautiful. Honestly, I think it's a beautiful thing that people have. And again, it gives these towns an identity. Like if every single state and town pushes their coasts and their mountains and their farmlands, and like everybody has that. It's not unique. But if some like toad creature from the 70s terrorized your town for a week, that's yours to own. Nobody has that. So like definitely make a big deal out of that. So that's why culturally it's interesting. It's part of your unique history. It makes the town unique. But yeah, that's kind of how I think about it culturally. I think of it as an element of wonder and a factual thing, because something in every single one of these cases, something happened. Whatever it was, who knows, but something happened for a week, for months, for a year.
Do you have a favorite cryptid? Can you pick one?
Yeah, and it's gonna be a cliche answer, unfortunately. But the Mothman is my favorite.
I was gonna ask about the Mothman.
Yeah, so growing up, the first cryptid book I ever read was a John Keel book. It had Mothman right on the cover. I was like, who is this Mothman? And just the visual of him is so cool. And then one of the first things I ever wrote about for Otis back in 2007 was the Mothman statue. I went down to West Virginia. I saw the statue. I didn't even know much about the Mothman story. I just knew there was a statue, so I didn't even. I went to the museum, but I didn't explore the TNT area. I didn't do any of that. But I went and saw the statue and then went to the museum back in 2007. So it was like a shade of what it is now. And then for the book, I got to, my daughters started getting really into cryptids. So they're watching all those like Amazon Prime documentaries and small town monster documentaries. And so I took them to Point Pleasant and we went to the museum and we went to see the Silver Bridge. We watched the Mothman prophecies. We saw the Mothman statue. And then I took my oldest daughter, she's 12. At night, we went out in the TNT area at night. So the TNT area is where the Mothman is supposed to have hid. And it's all these giant stone igloos or cement igloos that at one point held World War II munitions. And then it held chemical sludge from companies trying to dump stuff. And they're just all out throughout the forest. And so we went at night in these echoey, graffiti covered chambers, dirty chambers, and like hunted around. And it was so much fun. And so the Mothman, just for those personal memories for me, the design of the creature is so interesting. And the story is probably the most documented monster story because of Jonathan Keel. the most
Right.
documented story of all of them. So it's just super fascinating. So Mothman is
What
always gonna be
do
number
you
one.
think John Keel is just full of shit?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, he definitely was. I mean,
I'm throwing my book in the trash.
I those people that they're it's a special kind of shit though. It's like I'm kind of glad he is that way. I'm kind of glad the stuff he did. I love how, again, because of who I am, I love that he put himself right in the story. Like, didn't even try to be objective, just threw himself right in the story. So I respect that guy a lot. And but I do think either I never know. Even with the Warrens, is there some point where they sincerely believed, or were just shysters and then fell over into sincere belief, or you start believing your own stories, or where in the spectrum they are?
That's the question I'm so fascinated in, and
So
I
I
know I'll
assume,
never get a straight answer on.
yeah, you
that.
never will.
yeah.
And I assume Keel was the
Yeah.
same way, where, like, you know, he was a legit journalist, and like he just found this gold mine of weirdness and just started making theories about it. Ultra terrestrials kind of came about because of John Keel.
Yeah.
So he found a niche, and the thing about humans finding a niche is we don't want to lose it, especially if it's giving us fame or some money or whatever. We'll buy anything if it gives us fame and money. We'll star in a reality show. We'll do all kinds of hideous stuff. So with Keel, with that book becoming such a New York Times bestseller and kind of making his name, he had to be all in. You know, it's almost like Whitley Strieber, right? Suddenly he goes from novelist of horror to real, you know, whatever, nonfiction horror, where he's writing about his own abduction and stuff. So yeah, I think, I mean, if you read Mothman Prophecies, it's way more than just the Mothman. It's like silver aliens and tiny people and demons. You read that and you're like, man, this isn't just a straightforward cryptid story. This is like a week or 2 weeks of the weirdest stuff going on constantly. So, you know, you start like really doubting it when you read the book, because you're like, man, this is the weirdest point in time in the history of the world. Was Point Pleasant in the 1960s.
Amazing. Real fast, we're running low on time, but real fast, I want to get into. You've also written a number of horror books for younger audiences.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit real fast about like what you think goes into writing a scary story for younger audiences?
Yeah. So you first have to really hate kids and just want no. So I do have a point about this. So I love children's literature, always have. What I hate about children's literature is there's a tendency to want to teach kids, you know, to give them lessons about social causes and life, and I'm like, they have parents for that. Like, I don't want them turning to books to
give
like
the
learn
kids some
things.
crap.
I know. So but I think the one kind of responsibility of a children's writer is just to imbue wonder, to be like, hey kid, whatever your parents are telling you, whatever your pastor, your teacher telling you, the world's much bigger than that. So just so you know, it's a bigger, more crazy place. And all horror is another form of wonder. You know, it is, you know, the soulless void of space is terrifying, but it's kind of awesome. That's why awesome has both like a terrible idea, awful and awesome are pretty close together. And awe is this idea of being scared of God, but it's also a really cool thing. So it's just another form of wonder. So what I want to show the kids is, you know, I don't know, like being scared is kind of an amazing feeling. And again, people like me that don't believe in ghosts but still chase them around the world, you know, I want to be scared. That feeling appeals to me as a horror movie fan. I want to be scared. And so that's all I want to do with kids literature is A, show them the wonder of being scared. B, give them something that seems dangerous, that's not dangerous, but seems dangerous, so that they'll kind of start developing their own independence. Like as a Christian, the way I started learning the real world was I read books. You know, I read books, and my parents didn't care. As long as I was reading, they were happy with it. And I think most parents are like that. Whatever you read, who cares? But at least you're reading. Like TV, they'll kind of guard. Video games will guard. Movies will guard. But books, they'll be a lot more passive with. And so that's another thing. I want them to think that what they're reading, their parents wouldn't want them to read. So I try to make it as scary and vicious as possible. So they think, oh, my parents would never let me read this. And then the third point of that, and that'll get them hooked on reading, hooked on forbidden information, which is what reading really is, forbidden private information. And then the third part about that is I want to invent new monsters. I think that's like the highest form of imagination is a new monster. And too often with kids' books, all we do is kind of regurgitate our adult monsters, right? Ghosts and vampires and werewolves, which are all cool. I love them to death. But, you know, we're pretty jaded as horror fans, especially like when, you know, your favorite author comes out with another haunted house book, you're never rolling your eyes. You're like, hey, I'm comfortable with that. I love that. I'm comforted by that. And kids don't have that comfort. They have such a voracious appetite. They want to know all the joys of the world. They want to know all the spheres of the world. They want to know everything. So we should be like, that's the best place to experiment and create new monsters and give them their own monsters. Like stop like hand-me-downing vampires because it's easy to do because you're the first person to show them vampires or whatever. But like, I like writing for kids so much better than adults because they're not jaded and they'll take your experiments. So that's kind of what I want to, what I'm trying to do.
Jason, a new Christmas monster.
I know I would do it. I need to do it. My next book is a Halloween that I'm working on right now for kids. Is a Halloween book. It's actually based in Salem. But yeah, I definitely want to do a Christmas book for sure.
Hell yeah. J.W. Ocker, we can't thank you enough for your time. This was so fun.
Yeah, totally.
Where can we find you on the internet?
If you just go to oddthingsi'veseen.com, that's my website. Its acronym is OTIS, OTIS, oddthingsi'veseen.com. That'll take you to all my socials, to all my books, to all my 1,000 articles that are free that you don't have to buy stuff for. The Otis Club is there. So that's the kind of the podcast you mentioned. That's the center of my life, oddthingsi'veseen.com. From there, you can find out anything you want about me. And anything you don't want to know.
Amazing.
We can't thank you enough. Man, open invite anytime you want to come back on.
Let's do it again. Yeah, I got 2 books coming out later this year. We can do another one and talk about those 2 books.
Would love that.
Awesome. Let's definitely do it then.
And we're back. We're back here, deep beneath the New York Public Library. We spoke to Jason offline. Thankfully, he has helped us clear the green mist around you. I don't know.
I have to give my book to someone else. I have to curse somebody else now. That's the takeaway.
Literally stop shoving the book into my chest. I don't want it.
Just touch the book. Don't be a baby.
I'm not touching the book.
You're being a book baby. You're being a demon book baby, Brian. Just touch the book. Touch it one time. I dare you.
Let me do the outro and stop poking me with the fucking fleshbound curse book, please.
Bet you can't do the outro while you're holding the book.
Is that a fucking dare?
Maybe it's a dare, baby.
Give me the fucking book. We want to thank Carl Casey at White Bat Audio and Purple Planet for the use of their music. Do you want to get in touch with us? You can email us at spookybriananderic@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter at Brian and Eric Pod. We are going to Paracon July 16th and 17th. We'll be there both days. We'll be doing a live show. We'll be tabling. Tess Feifel from Astonishing Legends is going to be joining us the whole weekend. It's going to be a lot of fun. Oh my God, Eric, I'm getting swirled up in a green mist. Eric, oh no. Eric, how do I get rid of this again? Email me if you'll take this cursed book off of our hands.
Yeah, if you want a cursed demon book, hit us up, because...
For both of us here, Brian and Eric don't belong here. Thank you for listening, and stay safe out there!
Good night!